Robert Chen was worth $3 billion, but today he dressed like he'd never seen a $100 bill in his life. The 52-year-old CEO of Chen Industries stood outside his company's downtown office building at 6 a.m., wearing thrift store jeans and a faded jacket, watching employees arrive for the early shift. In his pocket was a white envelope containing $10,000 in cash. His test, his trap, his way of discovering who his people really were when they thought no one important was watching. Robert had built his empire from nothing, starting as a janitor in this very building 30 years ago. Now he owned it, but lately he'd felt disconnected, surrounded by yes-men and polished executives who told him what he wanted to hear instead of the truth. So he devised this experiment: drop the money, see who finds it, and discover what they do when faced with temptation. His assistant thought he was crazy. His wife called it cynical. But Robert needed to know. In a world where everyone wanted something from him, were there still honest people left? Or had he become so isolated by wealth that he'd forgotten what integrity looked like? The first employee through the door was Marcus, a security guard Robert recognized from company photos but had never actually met. Marcus moved with the tired determination of someone working a second shift, his uniform crisp, despite the early hour. Robert watched him swipe his badge and disappear inside. Then came a cluster of administrative assistants, laughing about something on one of their phones, a maintenance worker, two accountants arguing good-naturedly about a sports game. Robert studied each face, these people who made his company function, whose names he'd never learned despite signing their paychecks. At precisely 6:47 a.m., Robert made his move. He walked toward the entrance, timing it perfectly, so he'd pass a young woman heading inside. She wore a simple dress and carried a worn backpack, her name tag identifying her as Maya Santos, Junior Marketing Associate. As Robert brushed past her, he let the envelope slip from his pocket, landing on the concrete with a soft thump. He didn't look back, didn't pause, just kept walking around the corner. His heart pounded as he circled back to his hidden vantage point, a coffee shop across the street with a perfect view of the building entrance. Through the coffee shop window, Robert watched Maya stop mid-step. She'd noticed the envelope. For a moment she just stared at it, then glanced around as if looking for whoever dropped it. Robert leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. This was the moment. Would she pick it up? Would she keep it? Would she turn it in? Maya bent down and grabbed the envelope, and Robert saw her eyes widen as she felt its thickness. She opened it slightly, peeked inside, and her hand flew to her mouth. Even from across the street, Robert could see the shock on her face. $10,000 was probably more than she made in 3 months, maybe 6. She looked around again, more frantically this time, clearly trying to find the owner. But the morning crowd had thickened, and Robert was invisible in his disguise. Maya stood there for what felt like an eternity, the envelope clutched in her hands, her expression cycling through emotions Robert couldn't quite read. Then she did something he didn't expect. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Who was she calling? A friend? Family? Someone to brag about her lucky find? Robert felt a familiar cynicism settling over him. Of course she'd keep it. Everyone had a price. Robert watched Maya finish her phone call and head into the building, the envelope still in her hand. He waited 5 minutes, then followed, entering through a side entrance he still had key access to, despite never using it. He'd installed security cameras throughout the building years ago, state-of-the-art surveillance that he could access from his phone. Pulling up the lobby feed, he tracked Maya's movements. She didn't go to her desk. Instead, she went straight to the security office where Marcus was stationed. Robert's eyebrows rose. She was turning it in. He watched the silent footage as Maya handed Marcus the envelope and explained something animatedly, gesturing toward the front entrance. Marcus opened the envelope, his eyes going wide, just as hers had. They talked for several minutes, Marcus clearly asking questions, Maya shaking her head. She didn't know whose money it was. Finally, Marcus nodded, wrote something in a logbook, and locked the envelope in the security office safe. Maya signed what looked like a witness statement and left. Robert sat back, stunned. She'd actually turned it in. No hesitation, no keeping even a small amount for herself, just immediate honesty. But Robert's test wasn't over. It was just beginning. He'd learned something about Maya, but now he wanted to know more. Who was this junior marketing associate who'd returned $10,000 without a second thought? He pulled up her employee file on his phone, something he rarely did for anyone below executive level. Maya Santos, age 24, hired 8 months ago straight out of state college. Decent performance reviews, no disciplinary issues, salary $42,000 per year. Robert did the math. In this city, that was barely enough to survive. He dug deeper, accessing records he probably shouldn't have but justified as CEO privilege. Maya had student loans totaling $67,000. She lived in a studio apartment in one of the city's cheapest neighborhoods. Her emergency contact was listed as her mother in a different state. Recent HR notes mentioned she'd declined the company health insurance upgrade because she couldn't afford the premium increase. This was someone who desperately needed money, yet she'd walked past the easiest $10,000 she'd ever find. Why? Robert had to know. He made a decision that surprised even himself. He was going to meet her, really meet her, not as the billionaire CEO, but as someone who could learn her story. Robert spent the next week observing Maya from a distance, maintaining his disguise as a new facilities consultant hired to evaluate office efficiency, a cover story his assistant had reluctantly helped establish. He watched Maya arrive exactly 15 minutes early every day, always carrying the same worn backpack and a homemade lunch in a reusable container. She stayed late most nights, not because anyone forced her to, but because she genuinely seemed invested in her projects. He saw her help a struggling intern understand a marketing report, staying an extra hour to explain concepts she could have dismissed. He watched her split her lunch with a co-worker who'd forgotten his wallet, insisting it was no problem, even though her portions were already small. She volunteered to organize the office charity drive, spending her own time collecting donations and coordinating with local shelters. Every observation contradicted Robert's growing cynicism about human nature. Here was someone young, struggling financially, with every reason to be bitter or selfish, yet she moved through the world with generosity and integrity. On Friday afternoon, Robert engineered a coincidental meeting in the break room. He was pouring terrible vending machine coffee when Maya walked in, looking exhausted. "Long week?" he asked casually, playing his part as the forgettable consultant. Maya smiled tiredly. "Every week is long, but at least it's honest work, you know." She grabbed a tea bag from her personal stash. "I'm just grateful to have a job where I can actually make a difference, even if it's small." Robert nodded, studying her face. She had no idea she was talking to the man who owned everything around her, who could change her life with a single decision. And that anonymity gave him something he hadn't had in years: the truth. Over the next few days, Robert continued his conversations with Maya, each brief interaction revealing more about her character. She talked about her marketing projects with genuine passion, about ideas to improve employee engagement that no one in management had time to hear. She mentioned her mother back home, who needed surgery but kept postponing it because of cost. She spoke about her late father, who'd been a factory worker, and taught her that your character is the only thing nobody can take from you. That phrase stuck with Robert. During one lunch break, he finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind. "I heard someone found a bunch of cash outside the building last week," he said casually, watching her reaction. $10,000 just sitting there. Can you imagine?" Maya looked up from her sandwich and smiled softly. "I didn't have to imagine. I'm the one who found it." Robert feigned surprise. "Really? And you turned it in? Most people would have kept it." Maya's expression grew serious. "Most people probably need it desperately. I know I do, but it wasn't mine." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "My dad used to say that stolen money burns holes in your soul, not just your pocket. Even if you find it instead of taking it directly, keeping something that belongs to someone else changes you. Robert pressed further, genuinely curious now. But you didn't know who it belonged to. It could have been anyone's. It could have been lost forever if you hadn't found it. Maya nodded, wrapping up the remainder of her lunch. Saving it for dinner, Robert realized with a pang of recognition. That's true, but I'd know. Every time I spent $1 of that money, I'd remember that somewhere, someone was probably panicking about losing their life savings, or their rent money, or maybe something they'd saved for years for something important. How could I enjoy anything bought with their suffering? She met his eyes with surprising intensity. Money comes and goes. I'll earn more eventually, pay off my loans, help my mom. But if I'd kept that envelope, I'd have lost something I can never get back, the ability to look at myself in the mirror and like the person I see. No amount of money is worth that trade. Robert felt something crack open inside his chest. Here was a philosophy he'd forgotten existed, buried under decades of corporate strategy and wealth accumulation. Maya lived by principles he'd once held as a young janitor, but had slowly abandoned as he climbed the ladder of success. She reminded him of who he used to be before the billions, before the isolation, before the cynicism. That evening, Robert sat in his penthouse apartment overlooking the city, his wife Michelle reading beside him. "I found her," he said quietly. Michelle looked up from her book. "The employee you were testing, the one who found your money." Robert nodded. "Her name is Maya Santos. She's 24, drowning in student debt, earning barely enough to survive in this city, and she turned in $10,000 without a moment's hesitation because her dead father taught her about integrity." Michelle set down her book, studying her husband's face. "You're surprised." Robert laughed, but it came out hollow. "Surprised? I'm ashamed. I set up this test expecting to confirm my worst beliefs about people, that everyone has a price, that honesty is just a luxury of the wealthy. Instead, I found someone who lives by principles I've forgotten, who has nothing but refuses to compromise her values." He stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city lights. "She needs surgery for her mother but can't afford it. She's eating half portions to save money. She lives in a neighborhood I wouldn't drive through. And yet she has something I lost somewhere along the way. She has peace with who she is." Michelle joined him at the window, taking his hand. "So what are you going to do about it?" Robert turned to face his wife, and for the first time in years, he felt the clarity of purpose that had once driven him to build his empire. "I'm going to do something that will either prove I've learned something from her or prove I'm beyond redemption. I'm going to tell her the truth." Monday morning, Robert arrived at the office as himself for the first time in 2 weeks. Tailored suit, executive floor access, the full billionaire CEO presence. He sent a message through HR requesting Maya Santos to meet him in his office at 10 a.m. The request went through her supervisor, who immediately panicked, assuming Maya had done something wrong. By the time the message reached her, it had been filtered through 3 layers of nervous management, each adding their own worried interpretation. Maya arrived at the executive floor, pale and visibly shaking, clearly terrified she was about to be fired. Robert's assistant showed her into his massive corner office, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Maya stood in the doorway, clutching her worn backpack like a shield, her eyes wide as she took in the opulent space. "Ms. Santos, please sit down," Robert said gently, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. She sat on the edge of the seat, her posture rigid with anxiety. Robert studied her for a moment, then did something that clearly confused her. He smiled. "I owe you an apology and an explanation. The facilities consultant you met last week, that was me, Robert Chen. I've been working undercover in my own company." Maya's face went through a remarkable series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, recognition, and finally mortification. "Oh my God," Maya whispered, her hand covering her mouth. "I complained to you about the vending machines. I told you the executive team was out of touch." She looked like she wanted to disappear through the floor. Robert held up his hand. You told me the truth. That's exactly why I was there. But I didn't call you here to discuss vending machines, Maya. I called you here because of this. He pulled out the white envelope, the same one she'd found 2 weeks ago, still containing the $10,000. Maya's eyes went wide. That was yours? That was a test? Her voice cracked slightly, hurt flickering across her features. You were testing us? Testing me? Robert felt the accusation hit home. Yes, and I'm not proud of it. I was cynical, isolated, convinced that everyone around me only cared about money. So I dropped that envelope to see what would happen, expecting someone to keep it and confirm my worst beliefs about human nature. He pushed the envelope across the desk toward her. Instead, you proved me completely wrong. You returned money you desperately needed because your father taught you about integrity. You reminded me of values I'd forgotten I once believed in. Maya stared at the envelope, but didn't touch it. So what happens now? You reward me for passing your test? Give me a bonus for being honest? There was an edge to her voice that surprised Robert. Not anger, exactly, but something deeper. Disappointment. Because honestly, Mr. Chen, that would kind of ruin it. I didn't return that money to impress anyone or get a reward. I did it because it was right. Turning it into some kind of transaction feels... She searched for the word. Hollow. Robert sat back, impressed and chastened at the same time. She was right. Of course she was right. You're absolutely correct, he said quietly, which is why I'm not offering you a reward. I'm offering you an apology and a choice. He pulled out a folder from his desk drawer. I learned some things about you during my observation. Your mother needs surgery. You're buried in student debt. You're eating half meals to save money. You have brilliant marketing ideas that no one's listening to because you're too junior to have a voice in strategy meetings. He slid the folder across to join the envelope. Here's my choice for you. Take the $10,000. It's yours, no strings attached, because you earned it through your integrity. Use it however you need. Your mom's surgery, your debts, whatever helps most. Maya opened her mouth to protest, but Robert continued. Or, option 2, join my executive training program. Full scholarship for your MBA, guaranteed promotion track, and a salary that actually lets you live in this city. You'll work directly with senior leadership, implement those ideas you've been sitting on, and help me rebuild this company's culture into something that values people like you. He leaned forward. The catch? You can't have both. Choose the money or choose the opportunity. What matters more, immediate relief or long-term change? Maya sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the envelope and the folder like they were two different futures laid out before her. Robert watched emotions play across her face. Temptation, calculation, hope, and something else he couldn't quite identify. Finally, she looked up and met his eyes with an intensity that made him sit back slightly. Can I be completely honest with you, Mr. Chen? She asked. Robert nodded, intrigued. That's all I want. Maya took a deep breath. Neither of these options is what I actually want. The money would solve my immediate problems, yes. The opportunity would change my career trajectory, but both of them feel like they're about me, and I've spent the last 2 weeks thinking about something bigger. She leaned forward, her nervousness replaced by passion. You said I reminded you of values you'd forgotten. You said I helped you see your company differently. But Mr. Chen, I'm not special. I'm not the only person in this building with integrity or ideas or potential. I'm just the one who happened to find your test money. Robert frowned, not understanding where she was going. Maya continued, her words coming faster now. You learned something from watching me, right? About what it's like to work here at my level, about the struggles and the dedication and the invisible people keeping this company running? Robert nodded slowly. Yes, I saw things I should have noticed years ago. People like Marcus working double shifts, employees skipping lunch because they can't afford it, brilliant ideas dying because there's no pathway for junior staff to be heard. Maya's eyes lit up. Exactly. So here's what I actually want. Take the money and the opportunity, and instead of giving them to me, create something that helps everyone. Use the 10,000 to seed an employee emergency fund. Use the training program to develop talent from all levels, not just the people executives notice. Build systems that let people like me contribute without having to wait years to be considered valuable. She sat back, her cheeks flushed with emotion. I'll earn my own way up. I'll figure out my mom's surgery and my loans like I've been doing. But you have the power to change the entire culture of this company. Isn't that worth more than just helping one person? Robert stared at her, completely speechless. In 30 years of business, through countless negotiations and deals, no one had ever turned down his offers to ask for something bigger than themselves. Maya misread his silence as rejection and started backpedaling. I'm sorry, that was presumptuous. You're the CEO, you know what's best for the company. I shouldn't have... No, Robert interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. Don't apologize. Do you have any idea what you just did? Maya shook her head, looking worried. Robert stood and walked to the window, his back to her, composing himself. When he turned around, his eyes were bright. I've been a CEO for 15 years. In that time, I've had thousands of people ask me for money, opportunities, favors, promotions. Everyone wants something for themselves. And here you are, the one person who actually earned a reward, and you're trying to give it away to help people you don't even know. He walked back to his desk and picked up both the envelope and the folder. You're right. You're absolutely right, but you're also wrong about one thing. Maya looked confused. What's that? Robert smiled, a real smile, the kind he hadn't felt in years. You said you're not special. But Maya, someone who thinks like you, who leads like you without even having a title yet, that's exactly the kind of special this company needs. He set both items back on the desk. So, here's what's going to happen. We're going to do everything you suggested, the emergency fund, the talent development, the systems for hearing ideas from all levels, and you're going to help me build it, because I need someone who understands what it's actually like to work here. Consider yourself promoted to Director of Employee Innovation, effective immediately. Maya's mouth fell open. But I can't accept that. I just said I didn't want special treatment. Robert held up his hand. This isn't special treatment. This is me recognizing that you just showed me more leadership in 5 minutes than most of my executives show in a year. The question is, will you accept? Maya's promotion sent shockwaves through Chen Industries. By noon, the entire company was buzzing with rumors. Some said she was Robert's secret daughter. Others claimed she'd uncovered embezzlement. A few whispered she must have compromising information. The truth that she'd been promoted for her integrity and vision was apparently too mundane for corporate gossip. Her former supervisor, David, was furious. He'd been passed over for promotion 3 times and now watched a 24-year-old with 8 months' experience leapfrog into a director position. He wasn't alone in his resentment. At Maya's first executive meeting, she walked into a conference room full of men and women twice her age, all staring at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Robert introduced her simply. Maya Santos, our new Director of Employee Innovation. She'll be leading our Cultural Transformation Initiative. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, a senior VP named Gregory spoke up, his voice dripping with condescension. Employee Innovation, that's a new department. What exactly does it do, Ms. Santos? Maya felt every eye on her, felt the weight of their skepticism. This was her first test. And she knew it. She stood, her legs shaking but her voice steady. It listens, Maya said clearly. It listens to the people doing the actual work in this company and creates pathways for their ideas and needs to reach decision makers. It builds systems that treat employees as assets to develop, not expenses to minimize. Gregory leaned back in his chair, smirking. So HR with a fancy title? Several executives chuckled. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks but held her ground. No, HR manages policies. I'm here to change culture. There's a difference between managing people and actually valuing them. She pulled out her tablet. Robert had provided her with one that morning, and displayed a slide she'd created during her lunch break. This company has a 34% annual turnover rate in non-executive positions. The industry average is 19%. We spend $4.2 million per year recruiting and training replacements. Exit interviews cite lack of growth opportunities and feeling undervalued as the top reasons people leave. The room went quiet. The executive's actually paying attention now. My job is to cut that turnover in half within 2 years by creating programs that make people want to stay. Better employee retention means lower costs, stronger institutional knowledge, and improved productivity. This isn't charity, Mr. Gregory. It's smart business. Robert watched Maya present with growing respect. She'd done her homework in a matter of hours, pulling data he knew for a fact wasn't easily accessible. She must have worked through lunch, probably stayed up late researching. Gregory, however, wasn't convinced. That's a nice presentation for someone who's been in corporate America for less than a year. But culture change? That takes experience you simply don't have, Miss Santos. Maya nodded, surprising him by agreeing. You're absolutely right. I don't have your experience, but I have something else. I know what it's like to be the employee you're trying to retain. I know what makes someone like me feel valued versus tolerated. I know which policies sound good in a boardroom but fail miserably in practice. She looked directly at Gregory. 6 months ago, the company launched a wellness initiative that included free gym memberships. Do you know how many non-executive employees use them? Gregory frowned. I don't have those numbers offhand. Maya pulled up another slide. 11%. Because the gym is in this building, which means using it requires employees to extend their already long work days. Meanwhile, a simple mental health counseling benefit would cost less and actually serve the people who need support but can't afford therapy. The room shifted. Several executives were now looking at Maya with new respect. She'd just demonstrated that good intentions without ground-level understanding were worthless. Robert leaned forward. This is exactly why I hired her. Keep going, Maya. Over the next month, Maya worked 18-hour days building her programs from scratch. She launched the Employee Emergency Fund with the original $10,000 from Robert's test, matching it with company contributions to create a $50,000 safety net for staff facing unexpected crises. She established innovation hours, protected time where any employee could pitch ideas directly to leadership without going through layers of management. She created mentorship pairs matching junior staff with executives, forcing leaders to actually interact with the people they led. She implemented flexible scheduling for parents and caregivers. She started an education reimbursement program for employees pursuing degrees. Every initiative was designed based on feedback she gathered by doing something radical. She asked people what they needed. She held listening sessions in break rooms, sent anonymous surveys, ate lunch with different departments each day. The response was overwhelming. Within 3 weeks, the emergency fund had helped 12 families avoid evictions, medical bankruptcies, and car repossessions. The innovation hours generated 37 actionable ideas, 5 of which were immediately implemented and saved the company over $200,000 in operational costs. Turnover started dropping. Employee satisfaction scores began climbing for the first time in 3 years. But success bred resentment. David, Maya's former supervisor, began actively undermining her programs. He forgot to forward meeting invitations. He started rumors that the emergency fund was being abused. He questioned the ROI of every initiative in emails copied to the entire executive team. Other mid-level managers followed his lead, resistant to changes that threatened their authority. The tension came to a head when Maya discovered that Gregory had been blocking her access to budget reports she needed to track program effectiveness. She confronted him in his office, her professionalism barely masking her frustration. I need those reports to do my job, Mr. Gregory. He looked at her over his reading glasses, his expression cold. Your job is a vanity project, Ms. Santos. Mr. Chen is going through some kind of midlife crisis, reimagining himself as a benevolent leader instead of the ruthless businessman who actually built this company. These programs are expensive distractions that will be the first things cut when reality sets in. Maya felt anger flash through her. These programs are already showing results. Turnover is down 8% in 1 month. Employee productivity is up. We've generated cost-saving ideas that... Gregory cut her off. You've been here 9 months total. Don't lecture me about results. I've been building this company for 20 years. That night, Maya sat in her tiny apartment, eating ramen and questioning everything. Her phone rang, Robert's personal number, which she'd been given for emergencies. I heard about Gregory, he said without preamble. Maya sighed. Word travels fast. Robert's voice was tired. He's trying to turn the board against your programs, claims you're wasting money on feel-good initiatives with no measurable return. He's presenting a cost-benefit analysis at next week's board meeting, recommending we shut down everything you've built. Maya felt her stomach drop. He can do that? Robert was quiet for a moment. The board hired me to make them money, not win popularity contests. If Gregory convinces them that your programs hurt the bottom line, they'll force my hand regardless of what I want. You need to prove him wrong, Maya, with data, with results, with something undeniable. After they hung up, Maya stared at her laptop screen, looking at spreadsheets full of early metrics and anecdotal success stories. She had 1 week to prove that caring about people wasn't just the right thing to do, it was profitable. 1 week to justify her existence and the hopes of hundreds of employees who were finally feeling valued. 1 week to show that integrity and business success weren't mutually exclusive. She opened a new document and began typing, knowing she wouldn't sleep much before the board meeting. Everything she believed in was about to be tested. The boardroom was intimidating by design, dark wood paneling, leather chairs, a table that could seat 20 people and cost more than Maya's annual salary. She stood at the head of it, facing 12 board members who held the future of her programs in their hands. Gregory had presented first, his slides showing nothing but red numbers. Mrs. Santos's initiatives have cost this company $380,000 in direct expenses over 5 weeks, he'd said smoothly. Emergency fund distributions, program administration, consulting fees, flexible scheduling, coverage costs. Meanwhile, revenue remains flat, and these so-called innovation ideas are unproven novelties. The board members nodded, making notes. One asked pointedly, Mr. Chen, why are we funding social services instead of running a business? Robert had looked at Maya, his expression neutral but his eyes encouraging. Let's hear Ms. Santos's response. Now Maya stood before them, her presentation queued up, her heart hammering so hard she was sure they could hear it. She thought about her father, about integrity, about all the employees counting on her. Then she began. You're right that we've spent $380,000, she said clearly. Now let me show you what we got for it. Maya's first slide showed employee turnover. 5 weeks ago, our monthly turnover rate was 2.8%. This month, it's 1.6%, a 43% reduction. The cost to replace an employee averages $15,000 when you factor in recruitment, training, and lost productivity. In 1 month, we've prevented approximately 23 departures that would have cost $345,000 to replace. Our programs have already nearly paid for themselves. She advanced to the next slide. But that's just the beginning. The Innovation Hours program generated 37 employee ideas, 5 of which are now implemented. One suggestion from a warehouse worker redesigned our shipping logistics and will save $280,000 annually. Another from an accountant identified billing redundancies worth $95,000 per year. Total projected annual savings from employee innovations, $612,000. The board members leaned forward, suddenly interested. Maya continued, her confidence growing. The emergency fund has distributed $47,000 to 18 employees. 16 of them were actively interviewing elsewhere before receiving help. We didn't just prevent turnover, we turned struggling employees into loyal advocates. Employee referrals for new positions are up 64% because people actually want to work here now. Gregory interrupted, his voice sharp. Those are short-term fluctuations. You can't project long-term trends from 5 weeks of data. Maya turned to face Gregory directly. You're absolutely right, which is why I brought something else. She nodded to the back of the room, where Robert's assistant opened the door. In walked Marcus, the security guard, along with 4 other employees Maya had invited. These are the people your spreadsheets can't measure, Maya said. Marcus works double shifts because he's supporting his disabled brother. 3 months ago, he was 1 week from quitting to take a lower-paying job closer to home. The emergency fund covered his brother's medication costs when insurance denied the claim. He stayed, and last week he stopped an attempted robbery that would have cost the company $2 million in inventory loss. She gestured to the next person. This is Jennifer from accounting. Her innovation hour suggestion about the billing redundancies? That's saving you $95,000 annually. Before, she'd submitted the same idea through her supervisor 3 times over 2 years. It was ignored every time because she was too junior to understand the big picture. Maya looked around the room. Culture change isn't about feel-good initiatives. It's about unlocking the potential you're already paying for, but ignoring. Every person in this company has value beyond their job description, but you'll never access it if they're too busy worrying about evictions or too convinced that no one's listening to speak up. The room was silent. One board member, an older woman named Patricia, spoke up. How do you quantify loyalty, trust, the willingness to go beyond minimum requirements? Maya smiled. You quantify it by watching your turnover drop, your innovations increase, and your reputation improve. 3 recruiting firms have asked why our recent job postings are getting 300% more applications than industry average. Word is spreading that Chen Industries actually cares about its people. That's a competitive advantage you can't buy, but you can absolutely destroy by choosing short-term cost-cutting over long-term culture building. The board deliberated for 30 minutes while Maya waited outside, pacing the hallway with Marcus and the other employees she'd brought. Finally, Robert's assistant called her back in. The board members' faces were unreadable as she took her seat. Patricia, the older board member, spoke first. Ms. Santos, your presentation was compelling. Your data shows promising early results. However, Maya's heart sank at that word. However, Patricia continued, this board has a fiduciary responsibility to maximize shareholder value. Mr. Gregory has raised valid concerns about the sustainability and scalability of your programs. We cannot continue funding initiatives based on 5 weeks of results, no matter how encouraging. Maya felt the room tilt. She'd failed. Gregory looked triumphant, but Patricia wasn't finished. Therefore, we're implementing a 6-month trial period. Your programs will continue with full funding, but you'll report monthly progress with hard metrics. If at the 6-month mark you cannot demonstrate sustained improvement in retention, productivity, and employee-generated cost savings, the programs will be discontinued. She looked directly at Maya. Can you accept those terms? Maya exhaled, relief flooding through her. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Patricia's expression softened slightly. Don't thank me yet. 6 months is generous in business time, but it's also very short. Prove this works, Mrs. Santos. As the meeting adjourned, Gregory approached Maya with a cold smile. 6 months. Enjoy them while they last. The novelty will wear off, your numbers will plateau, and reality will reassert itself. He walked away before she could respond. But Robert caught up to her in the hallway, his face serious. Maya, there's something you need to know. Gregory's not just resistant to change, he's protecting something. He handed her a folder. My wife suggested I look deeper into why he was so adamantly against your programs. I had an independent audit done on departmental budgets. Maya opened the folder and felt her blood run cold. He's been inflating his department's expenses for years, skimming off the top, small amounts, hard to detect, but over time, Robert nodded grimly, over $600,000. He's been using ghost contractors and fake consulting fees. Your transparency initiatives threaten to expose him because they require detailed budget accountability. Maya looked up, shocked. You've known this and didn't say anything? Robert's expression was pained. I found out yesterday. I wanted to see how the board meeting played out before deciding how to handle it. But now I need your advice, Maya. How do I handle this without destroying company morale? Gregory has allies, supporters, people who've worked with him for years. Maya thought about it carefully, aware that her answer would reveal what kind of leader she truly was. You handle it with transparency and integrity, she finally said. Call a company-wide meeting. Explain what was discovered, what actions you're taking, and why. Show everyone that no one is above accountability, not even long-term executives. Yes, it'll be uncomfortable. Yes, Gregory's allies will be upset. But if you hide it, or handle it quietly, you're telling employees that different rules apply at different levels. You'll undo everything we've been building. Robert studied her face. That's a very idealistic approach, and potentially damaging to the company's reputation. Maya met his eyes steadily. You dropped an envelope with $10,000 to test if people were honest. You found out that I was. Now your employees are testing you. Will you be honest when it's hard, when it costs you something, when it's easier to sweep problems under the rug? She paused. You taught me that integrity matters. Now show everyone else. Robert was quiet for a long moment, then slowly nodded. You're right. God help me, you're right. We'll announce it tomorrow. He looked at her with something like wonder. You know what surprises me most about this whole situation? I dropped that envelope, expecting to confirm my cynicism about people. Instead, I found you, and you keep proving that doing the right thing is possible, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. Maya smiled sadly. My dad would say that's when it matters most, when there's actually a cost to being honest. Easy integrity isn't really integrity at all. The next morning, Robert called an all-hands meeting, something that hadn't happened in the company's 20-year history. Every employee, from janitors to executives, gathered in the main auditorium. The room buzzed with nervous energy and speculation. Robert took the stage, and the room fell silent. I'm going to tell you something difficult, he began, his voice carrying through the space. Yesterday, an internal audit revealed that Gregory Mitchell, our senior vice president of operations, has been embezzling from this company for over 5 years. Total amount stolen, approximately $600,000. He's been terminated and criminal charges are being filed. Gasps rippled through the audience. Robert continued, I'm telling you this publicly because I owe you transparency. For too long, this company operated on the principle that executives were beyond scrutiny. That ends today. No one is exempt from accountability. Not Gregory, not any other executive, not even me. He paused, letting that sink in. Some of you are probably wondering why I'm airing this publicly instead of handling it quietly. The answer is simple. I learned from one of you that integrity means doing the right thing even when it's hard, even when it costs you something. We're building a new culture here, one where honesty matters at every level. Robert then did something unprecedented. He invited Maya onto the stage. She walked up nervously, acutely aware of hundreds of eyes on her. Many of you know Maya Santos, Robert said. Some of you think she got promoted because of nepotism or politics or luck. I want to tell you the real story. He proceeded to explain everything. The dropped envelope, the test, Maya's decision to return the money despite desperately needing it, her choice to ask for systemic change instead of personal reward. I tested her integrity expecting her to fail, Robert admitted. Instead, she reminded me what this company was supposed to be about. The programs she's built aren't charity. They're investments in the people who make this company run. And they're working. He displayed metrics on the screen behind them: turnover down 47% over 6 weeks, employee satisfaction up 38%, cost-saving innovations generating over $600,000 annually, recruitment applications up 310%. "These aren't just numbers," Robert said. "They represent real people feeling valued, real families getting help, real ideas finally being heard." Maya's 6-month trial period with the board? "I'm overriding it. These programs are permanent and they're expanding." The room erupted in applause. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. After the meeting, something remarkable happened. Employees approached Maya in waves, not to congratulate her, but to share ideas. A maintenance worker proposed a safety improvement that could prevent injuries. An IT specialist suggested a system upgrade that would save hours of manual work. A receptionist offered a customer service innovation she'd been thinking about for years, but never had a channel to voice. Within a week, Maya's team had logged over 100 new ideas, 20 of which were immediately actionable. The culture shift Robert had hoped for was actually happening. 3 months later, Maya sat in her new office, still modest by executive standards, but a vast improvement from her old cubicle. Her mother's surgery had been successful, paid for through the company's enhanced health benefits. Her student loans were being tackled through the education reimbursement program she'd helped design. But the real satisfaction came from the updates crossing her desk. The emergency fund had helped 43 families avoid financial catastrophe. Employee turnover had stabilized at 63% below previous rates. The company had been featured in 3 business publications as an example of successful culture transformation. Recruitment costs had plummeted because people actively wanted to work there. Revenue was up 12% as engaged employees drove innovation and productivity. 6 months after finding that envelope, Maya stood beside Robert at a company celebration event. Marcus had been promoted to head of security. Jennifer from accounting was now leading a special projects team. David, her former supervisor, had actually apologized and asked to join her initiatives. The transformation was real and sustainable. Robert raised his glass for a toast. 6 months ago, I dropped an envelope with $10,000, expecting to confirm my worst beliefs about human nature. Instead, I discovered Maya Santos, who taught me that the best investment a company can make isn't in technology or marketing. It's in the character of its people. He turned to Maya. "You returned money you desperately needed because your father taught you that integrity matters. In doing so, you transformed an entire company and reminded a cynical billionaire what really matters in business and in life." Maya raised her own glass, her voice thick with emotion. "My dad used to say your character is the only thing nobody can take from you, but I learned something else from this experience. When you live by your values, you don't just protect your character, you inspire others to find theirs. Thank you for giving me the chance to prove that doing the right thing isn't just morally correct, it's good business." As they clinked glasses, Robert reflected on how a simple test had become the catalyst for transformation he never expected. He'd dropped cash to catch people being dishonest. Instead, he discovered that integrity, when recognized and rewarded, could change everything. The result hadn't just surprised him, it had saved him from the cynicism that nearly destroyed everything he'd built. And it had all started with one young woman choosing to do the right thing when no one important was watching.